Welcome back. I'm Brandon, the HBAR Bull, once again joined by Zepsi. Now, he was on a little bit of a hiatus, but we've got him back finally. So we both do some contract work for the HBAR Foundation, but we don't do these weekly updates in any official capacity. We're just coming to you personally to give you the latest in the Hedera ecosystem. Welcome back, Zep.
How's it going, Brandon?
It's going good. We have a lot to cover today, but as always, none of this is financial advice. Use it for entertainment or educational purposes only. So, Zeplet, as I mentioned, you haven't been around the past couple weeks on the show, but you've been busy as far as promoting Hedera out there. Can you let us know what you were up to?
Yeah, so I was at Paris Blockchain Week Summit, which is the annual Parisian summit and the biggest blockchain conference in France. And the last time I went to a conference was 2 years ago, and it was actually Paris Blockchain Week again. And there was just a massive, massive difference, I think, in the last 2 years, just in A, awareness of Hedera, but B, awareness of, that more sort of enterprise institutional side of the ecosystem. When I visited them 2 years ago, it was NFTs, it was consumer engagement, it was a bit more degenny, right? It overlapped with NFT Paris. It was during the NFT wave, the NFT hype, where it was almost just filled with NFT startups, and that was really it. This year was completely different. It was more enterprise focused. You had Ripple there, you had Aleph Zero, you had a lot of privacy preserving technologies for looking towards institutional DeFi and this kind of thing. It was a lot more of a mature audience, right? There was banks walking around, there was fashion houses walking around, etc., etc. And so I was at the Hedera booth. I think I was staffing it maybe about 5 hours a day or so with the Swirlds team, with the HBAR Association team, and then I was there as the only representative of the foundation. But the real theme that I think we all picked up on was that rather than us seeking anyone out, there was people coming to us every hour of the day. When I was there 2 years ago, it was almost like we were reaching out, pulling people into the booth, whereas this time it was just a constant queue of people coming in and out. And these were people that had heard of Hedera. They weren't aware of, every use case on the network, as they weren't fully in depth in the network, but they'd heard of it, they'd associated with institutions, they'd associated with enterprises, and they'd looked at it as one of the future top 10 chains, but, if I was to put it that way. And so I had conversations with some of the largest fashion houses in Europe, had with some of the largest sports teams in Europe. There was a very big bank walking around. I had a side meeting with Peter Schroeder, who's one of the directors at Circle. We had the Multiverse team, eGold. They came over talking about how Hedera is leading enterprise. There was a lot of different conversations. Of course, not all of these turn into something, but there was a lot of interest from very large institutions, from very large enterprises, from very large organizations, all specifically for Hedera. And not just, joining the council and sitting there, but we want to do something in supply chain, or we want to do something with NFTs and consumer engagement. They all came to us with visions of use cases that could be facilitated by Hedera. And so for me, I think that was a really, really great takeaway, is seeing that consistent institutional and enterprise interest, but also just the general awareness of Hedera felt much, much stronger this year. And so I think I'd like to see, as the trajectory of Web3 as a whole continues in that direction, that will continue that mindshare and continue that development. And then actually lastly, on a last note, that it was really, really great meeting the HBAR Association and the Swirlds teams individually. I think they were massive, massive proponents of the ecosystem, and hearing some of the stuff that the HBAR Association's got going on rather in their pipeline. I couldn't be more excited. So a lot of exciting things to come over the next year. Hopefully a lot of those leads coming from Paris, but in general, great feedback from me for Paris Blockchain Week Summit.
Yeah, now Paris Blockchain Week, of course, is a big crypto conference that's over there in Europe, but there's even some bigger ones coming up in the weeks and months to come. The one that's happening this week is Token 2049. And what I want to touch on with that is, of course, Karate Combat. They're going to be having an event on Saturday. It's going to be Saturday morning if you're here in the US. Now, that's a little bit odd for maybe some of the people that are used to Karate Combat events, but it's going to be in the evening over there in Dubai. So that's why it's going to be so early. So certainly don't miss it, and don't miss the final deadline to put your up-only gaming votes in. It's going to be a huge event. I think Karate combat is probably one of the most engaging things you can do in crypto right now, and it's only getting bigger. Now, of course, how they're using Hedera is with the up-only gaming, and that's pretty much you pick which fighters you think are going to win. You put your tokens on those fighters. If you win, you get more. If you lose, you don't lose anything. Now, of course, if you bought them in the open market, you can lose in dollar terms, but you're not going to lose in the karate token terms. So let's get into some of those fights. So to start, I'm getting all the money lines from BetOnline AG. Those numbers are changing all the time, so check it up until right before the start of Karate Combat 45. And the same goes for the up-only gaming. This is just at the time of recording, and these numbers are changing at all times. So first, we're going to look at the pit submission series. Alcathiri is a slight favorite according to the money line, with a win probability of about 62%, but is a pretty big underdog in the up-only gaming, with only 35% of participants betting on him. Now, I'm not sure if this is a misunderstanding, but it could be an opportunity. Craig Jones is the biggest favorite of the night, and the money line is sitting at negative 1,500, which is a win probability of 94%. And that's pretty well in line with the up-only gaming, which is sitting at 91%. But the difference with the submission fighting is there's less of a puncher's chance, so I think these are actually easier to pick. In the next one, we have a pretty lopsided money line as well. Durat is at negative 900, which is a win probability of about 90%, which has 87% of the up-only gaming players voting for him. Zarin Far is a slight favorite at negative 145 on the money line, which equates to a win probability of 59%, and there's even more up-only gaming players voting for him at 69%. With another bantamweight fight, we have Karim versus Kaushik. Karim is a pretty big favorite at minus 360, which is a win probability of 77%, pretty in line with the up-only gaming. 73% of voters are going with him. Then we move up to lightweight with Ali versus Gupta. Ali is a minus 285 favorite, which equates to a 71% win probability, and even more up-only gaming voters are going with him at 79%. We have Bruno Souza coming back this time around. Now, his 2-3 record isn't really a fair assessment because he only fights top competition. Souza's a pretty good favorite here at minus 300 on the money line. That's a win probability of 73%, and he's racking up 82% of the up-only gaming votes. We have similar odds with Kakramanov over Joframa. Kakramanov has a 73% win probability, and 85% of up-only gamers are going with him. The Buzzsaw Rin is going up against Singh, and out of the traditional karate combat fights, he's the biggest favorite at a minus 550. On the money line, that's a win probability of 85%, but after seeing some of his last fights, 96% of up-only gamers are going with him. And moving over to the main card, Raymond Daniels is a pretty heavy favorite over Farrell at minus 500 on the money line. That's a win probability of 83%, and about the same are going for him in up-only gaming. The next one's pretty interesting. That's Roca versus Tubaev. Now, Tubaev is the champion at bantamweight. Roca is the champion at lightweight and has gone all the way up to welterweight. Roca is a slight favorite at minus 165. That's a win probability of 62%. But 86% of the up-only gamers are going with him. But he must have had a nasty weight cut to get down to bantamweight. So this might be a good situation to go with the dog. And next up, we have the main event. We have Luke Rockhold, who is a former UFC champion, going up against Joe Schilling. Now, these guys are pretty much even as far as the money line, and the name recognition has a little bit more going towards Rockhold as far as the up-only gaming, but these guys are pretty evenly matched. Of course, Token 2049 is huge, but we have Consensus coming up at the end of May, and that Karate Combat event might even be bigger. What are your thoughts on this, Zep?
The last data we got, I think, from the last event, the kickback event, was that there was 62,000 active wallets, active Hedera accounts in up-only gaming at the last event. That growth trajectory is just, remarkable in itself. And I think, being at Token 2049, very, very Web3 native audience, and of course Consensus coming up, I can only see that getting bigger and bigger, right? They seem to be at, really, really accelerating on that hockey stick trajectory. But, beyond just that growth, beyond what they're bringing in terms of active accounts, they are again and again showing themselves as real proponents of the entire Hedera ecosystem, right? The last event we had Galaxy in the pit, we had Dead Pixels in the pit, and this week we saw them actually collaborate with a new NFT project on Hedera called Peculiar Peeps. Peculiar Peeps is built by HBAR to the Moon, Andy, the man also behind Citadel Wallet, one of the biggest proponents of Hedera in the ecosystem, real OG in the space. He's come together. He's got some great partnerships in the works, got some great artistic direction. working with Kabila to launch the NFTs. But again, he's working there with Karate Combat for this giveaway, and that's in the run-up to the Dubai fight. So really exciting to see them not only bringing mainnet activity, but also greater awareness to our entire ecosystem, and really excited for Peculiar Peeps as well as Karate Combat.
Yeah, it's going to be a fantastic event. I've already started to make my up-only gaming picks, but I'm going to be tweaking them as time goes on. So I do want to get into Shark Bites this week. Some of the best questions I've seen come from the community so far. So let's listen to what Rob had to say. Rob, welcome back. How's your week going?
Hey, Brandon. Another busy week, but it's all Hedera related, so I can't complain.
Well, that's what we want to hear. So we'll get right into these questions here today.
Sure.
H Bargains has two. We'll start with this one. We all know there's currently a throttle on HCS TPS, and at a certain level of TPS, we will need to begin sharding. The throughput of smart contracts is much lower than HCS throughput, and this goes for all the base layer services. So whether it's HCS, whether it's HTS, whether it's crypto transactions, they're all at that 10,000 transaction per second level, and that's just the throttle. It can be lifted to many tens of thousands of transactions per second, but that's opposed to the smart contract service, which only can handle about 300 to 350 transactions per second. They're inherently less efficient. But he follows up with an interesting question. He says, should we expect smart contract TPS to require sharding before HCS TPS? What are your thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, so there are throttles, and there are throttles, as you rightly say, across all the transactions and transaction types. So it is possible that if we had a surge in smart contract service transactions, that some rebalancing of the throttles would be necessary. The throttles are there in order to kind of maintain the balance of consumption of the resources that these nodes have, right? So it's a most appropriate estimate at the moment for where those throttles should be, but one can change against another should it be necessary. So rebalancing one throttle against the other is very much doable and by design. As you said, the smart contract service is around 350 TPS, but given each contract call uses a variable amount of gas, we prefer to think of that particular kind of throttle like 15 million gas per second. That's the kind of the equivalent. And of course, that could be additional resource could be provided to that, or another throttle could be taken down, or we could move to shards. And sharding is something that is being planned for. Sharding requires state proofs. It requires a level of kind of utility and revenue as well to support a network kind of growth leap like that. And we're still some way off, right? We don't really need to do it right now, but as everyone can see, it's in the roadmap that we move to shards at a particular point. Now, whether that's near or far or medium term, we've got a kind of a growth curve that we're working to, but that's going to change over time. So yeah, we've got plenty of ability to pull levers. It's not just, we talk about the 10,000 throttle at the moment because that's the one that is the big number. We passed 47 billion transactions this week. In just a couple of weeks, we're going to be celebrating 50 billion. Maybe even around the New York City meetup. How cool would that be if we were able to kind of see 50 billion sort of tick over at the together in New York? But it'll be around that time, I suspect, maybe just the week before. So that's kind of where we are. We've got plenty of levers to pull, lots of ways of achieving what we want to do, and within the resources that we currently have within the network. And then we've got this big leap towards sharding, which requires state proofs and growth and revenue, and it's all going to plan.
And I will say that if we start to hit those smart contract limits, that's over $1 million worth of revenue per day. So it's a good problem to have.
It's a great problem to have, yeah. And the DeFi ecosystem is one of the largest users of the smart contracts, and we've got lending protocols coming as well. So we're going to see a big surge in growth around the smart contract service. So I wouldn't rule it out being in that sort of sooner rather than later period.
Yeah, it'll be good to see. So H. Bargains actually had another good question. His second one is, does the energy usage of the network scale linearly with the number of nodes? Also, do the energy consumption numbers we see posted include mirror nodes or extra computation required in smart contracts? I thought this was an interesting one as well.
Yeah, and they do. They do increase linearly. Each node consumes an incremental amount of energy with load. They don't consume less with, as the number of nodes increases, that's balanced across the network, and they all, do the same amount of work for the network. The extra computation that is required in smart contracts has minimal impact, to be honest, on the overall energy consumption of a node. That's marginal or almost negligible, I guess. Mirror nodes were included in the calculations from the perspective of the Hedera network. So, those mirror nodes that Hedera or Swirlds Labs hosts and runs, so they're included in the UCL calculations and are part of that kind of carbon negativity of the Hedera network. Additional mirror nodes, I don't believe, are included. And we know we've got mirror nodes run by Archaea and Validation Cloud and others. And additional mirror nodes can be added very easily. Google has this one-click deployment for mirror nodes. Mirror nodes are designed to be potentially special purpose. So, the topics that a particular solution uses or an enterprise uses can be very specific to those uses of the mirror node. And in fact, at AP Plus, we're specifically looking at this. Does mirror node or a particular use of a mirror node, and should that be included in the entire stack that we use? And I personally believe it should, and actually fits very well like that. So one can't include that in the calculations for the overall energy consumption of the network. But in the same way as bridges and custody technology providers and other infrastructure integration services that extend the network are also not included, either for the Hedera network or for any of the other comparable networks. These are kind of that next ring of infrastructure outside of the main net and the mirror net that is provided for. Maybe in the future, when we've got a more mature ecosystem growing, and we can compare maybe use case by use case on different networks. But actually, the UCL reports with those other universities peer reviewing them were very, very focused on the Hedera network and other comparable, or as it turned out, not comparable proof of stake networks.
And one interesting little tidbit of information around that, UCL actually did that before they became a council member. It was one of the things that made them want to become a council member. It wasn't the other way around, which a lot of people sometimes think was the case.
Yeah, but they did a second report as well for Davos this year, right? So they not only did they join post that first report, which kind of opened their eyes to the wonders of Hedera network, but Paolo Tasca and his team followed up with another one 18 months or so later. And of course they've now created the DLT Science Foundation. They're doing a lot of work with the Sustainable Impact Fund, with DLT Earth. Very, very much engaged UCL and doing some amazing things with Hedera.
All right, next up, we have one of our favorite community members. We have Coinman, who asks, tell us more about what Wisekey plans to do on Hedera. When TPS go burr, if you're privy to that information. So, Rob, have you been following what Wisekey is doing?
Wisekey are one of the undersung, if not unsung, heroes in the Hedera space. They're one of Hashgraph Association's earliest partners, and we saw some announcements a while ago around the Wise Art initiative. These are all kind of little breadcrumbs of information. Now, I'm not going to do this justice today, and I thank CoinMan for the question. I'm going to come back next week having done a lot more research, because I was broadsided by this massive DePin satellite seal coin announcement that Danny dug up. And isn't it great to see Danny Eade back in the ecosystem doing some amazing kind of investigative work? So welcome back, Danny. I want to say thank you for the question, CoinMan. And I'm going to do this justice next week, and I'm going to find out some of the real details behind this. For those who want to see Danny's work, then have a look at the thread. He did like a 20-tweet thread on X the other day about these new announcements. IoT and DePin on Hedera is becoming a really strong narrative. I mean, of course, we've got Neuron. We did a lot of work with Swirlds Labs on that helium proposal, which wasn't successful, but actually is now materializing into something pretty special that I can maybe talk about in a few weeks' time that we're looking at. And there are a number of other initiatives around decentralized physical infrastructure. And that actually means the sensors, the IoT devices, the incentivization of things like gateways on LoRaWAN networks or 5G networks or bespoke networks. So, that leads into our, kind of wonderful utopian futures of smart cities and frictionless supply chains and everything. So very excited about this departure from the normal narrative and what Wisekey are doing. Look at the Wisekey website as well. They're involved in these pico satellites and low Earth orbiting infrastructure, as well as digital identity, all underpinned by this relationship with Hedera. Super exciting on this front.
When you hear or when you see the founder of Wisekey, posing for pictures with Elon and talking about how they're getting their own capabilities for launching satellites, we're probably on the right track.
Absolutely.
I'm so impressed with these questions this week. A lot of the people that asked them were people that have asked questions in the past, but they only keep getting better. The next one comes from HBAR Hub, who says, I think it's brilliant to use mirror nodes, separating consensus from data storage. It avoids state bloat. Is it beneficial/practical to have a pool exactly like Account 800 for full mirror nodes to pay for some, not all, of the costs involved, and less with more participation? I thought this was a really interesting question to give more support potentially for mirror nodes, because we know we've run into some mirror node issues in the past. But what are your thoughts on this one, Rob?
It is interesting, isn't it? For those who don't know, Account 800 is that account which incentivizes native staking. So it's the one that receives a portion at the moment, 10% of the network fees go there, and then native staking rewards are paid out of that. Now, if there were another, I don't know. I mean, it's a really interesting idea. It would effectively be a subsidy for the use of mirror nodes. This presupposes that the mirror node infrastructure is under-supported, and I'm not certain that the recent challenges with that. I think, Brandon, you're referring to the Hashpack token launch. Is that what you're referring to?
That was one of the things, but we have seen issues around mirror nodes in the past.
Yeah, and it's a developing and evolving kind of space. Mirror nodes are part of the infrastructure. We would like to see more, but only if it's commercially viable to support more. Like I said earlier, we've got some partner providers that are hosting mirror nodes at the moment. Swirlds also hosts one, and so most of the time, sufficient mirror node infrastructure to support the current utility and usage of the Hedera network. As that grows, then one would expect the number of mirror nodes required to grow also, commensurately with the revenue. And also, like I said earlier, the kind of the utility of having mirror node infrastructure for special purposes within one stack also grows. So when BitGo made their recent announcement for joining the governing council, they announced that they had 6 mirror nodes. those aren't public mirror nodes. Those are actually part of the BitGo infrastructure to do the thing that they need to do with Hedera, on behalf of their customers. So that's a great example of how mirror nodes can be used in a kind of private way and also the public way, which is absolutely and obviously necessary for all usage of the network. So I mean that's something that's growing as well as we go. Now, how do we incentivize them? Well, it could be subsidized, but I'm not sure that that's the way it was designed to be. Then which parts of the infrastructure would you also then incentivize? And then you're kind of you're clipping all the network fees, the same amount of network fees for subsidizing different parts of the infrastructure. It's far better to grow the network, grow the revenue of the network, and then make it commercially viable for third parties, partners, to provide that as a service, as we are seeing, being developed through, BCW's Archaea and Validation Cloud and others. Mirror nodes are like, I think of mirror nodes like validators. We talk a lot about the open source nature of the Hedera network. We get a lot of demand from community for community nodes because there's a kind of sense that is participation in the network, and of course it is. Some people will want to run their own node, but it's not the same as in other blockchain networks. You're not kind of in the old school ways kind of mining for Bitcoin, or you're not validating or participating in stake and then providing for that, and you're not necessarily you don't need mainnet nodes to validate the network, and a lot of other networks have the ability to kind of have a validator node, not necessarily participating in the creation of blockchain, but actually being able to verify the data for oneself. And that's the core purpose, one of the core principles of distributed ledger technology. So anyone can set up a node. Like I said earlier, there's a one-click deploy on Google, or you can create your own mirror node. But there's a cost associated with that, of course, and it does consume a lot of data. So most people would want that to be part of a business or part of a business proposition that is commercially viable. So I think it's an emerging space. The idea is very interesting. I mentioned community nodes. I think community nodes are a necessary part of this equation. It's not just mirror nodes. In this kind of onion of Hedera kind of network layers, you've got your mainnet consensus layer, and then you've got your mirror node mirror net, and then we'll extend through shards and through community nodes. And so at that point where community nodes are necessary, I think there's probably a way of incentivizing those in the first instance, more so than mirror nodes. And in the similar way to this bootstrapping of the mainnet, we can create conditions where the adoption of community nodes is either subsidized in a way that HBAR Hub suggests, or directly from Treasury. So there are different ways that the growth of the network based on the demand for the network is achieved.
All right, Rob, and the last one comes from Dude Mantu. He says, what would a big financial institution prefer when processing $1 million transaction? 2-second faster finality with a chain with a mempool and MEV issues, or a chain with no leader, no mempool, or MEV issues? Safety or speed? He also mentions the Solana issues related to the recent meme coin volume. But Rob, I actually have some thoughts on this, but you actually might cover it. So I'm going to get your thoughts first. What do you think?
For a financial institution, considering $1 million or a $1 transaction, they're concerned with security first. Security, security, security. No other network is ABFT. And so, that is a necessary condition. Of course, there are aspects of compliance and things like capability, ISO 20022, ability. Those things are in consideration, but security is the first. And security equals trust and the ability to ensure that that transaction is completed in the way that financial institution expects. Whether that be a fund manager like Aberdeen, or whether it be a bank issuing a stable coin, or any other usage of the network, in order to adopt a public distributed ledger network, a financial institution, which is a regulated entity, has to jump through so many hoops, both internally, with its own risk teams, with its compliance teams, with its product teams. It needs to be strategically aligned, and therefore, that risk needs to be accepted by someone whose neck is on the block, and then it's got to be proven to the regulator that it's a technology which is commensurate with that regulation. So lots of things to jump through, which is why I don't believe we've seen any financial institution doing more than just kind of dipping its toe in the water. I mean, there's obviously a lot of discovery work. There's a lot of experimentation. There are a number of big and high-profile projects, including our own. But security is the first thing. If you take security away and take, and the fact that the asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerance of Hedera is, superior in orders of magnitude, in my belief, than other networks that have these mempool, MEV, leader-driven consensus. If you take all that away, then financial institutions are very interested in things like settlement finality, and not just probabilistic settlement finality. 99% of the time it's final. This is absolute settlement finality. So legal finality on Hedera is unique in this ecosystem. There are, because just of the nature of blockchains, they don't achieve absolute legal settlement finality. So that's a really important aspect as well. Settlement time is probably the third. So, time to settlement is important. Probably not so much for $1 million transaction, but as you go down the scale, things that I'm particularly interested in, like micropayments and consumer type engagement interactions, you need it to be quick, right? So settlement finality is without compromise, right? So the compromise is usual. In fact, in TradFi and in Web 2, most fast settlement times are actually, a compromise, through based on risk. So credit card settlements, for example, don't take the money from your account immediately. They're settled at the back end. They're authorized quickly, but they're actually settled slow. We don't need to do that on Hedera, and the Web3 promise of the future is the fast settlement, which Hedera clearly delivers on, and delivers on at the micro end of the spectrum as much as the top end of town. And then there's other things, obviously, that financial institutions are particularly interested in, like regulatory clarity, because they're primed and ready to go. Most of them, they understand the nature of the transformational change, the innovation that these sorts of technologies provide. But those that aren't comfortable on the leading or even the bleeding edge are just holding back, waiting for that regulatory clarity. We'll see a Cambrian explosion of financial solutions, I suspect, when that emerges, and we're seeing it emerge in some jurisdictions faster than others. I mean, lots of interesting things coming out of the UK in the last couple of weeks. I think they're positioning themselves to be in the forefront of the adoption of technology. Clearly, we've got in Europe, we've got the MICA regulations, which provide a lot more clarity, the markets in crypto assets. And Hong Kong and Singapore are certainly on that the forefront of that as well. And that's where financial institutions are particularly looking towards. So I know that doesn't answer specifically the question, but I think it gives a really good context. But you said you had some points as well. I'll hand the mic back so you can make yours.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I know that I've read some things around, what is instant settlement considered, and I've seen that it's under 15 seconds. I know that credit cards like to shoot for under 7 seconds. Of course, right now, Hedera is at about 3.3 seconds, but that's true finality, like you were saying, compared to the probabilistic nature of the blockchains. And, we know that there's best practices out there. How many confirmations does there need to be for it to be good enough? And with Bitcoin, we usually want 6 confirmations. You've heard that hour number out there. I think for Ethereum, it's 15. because of the nature of Solana, which of course was brought up in this question, it was many more than that. And the standard, the best practice for that, it usually took about 12 seconds to get enough confirmations to feel confident. And, they mentioned here that 2 seconds faster than Hedera. That's going down to just one confirmation on Solana to hit those numbers. Though there are platforms, there are decentralized exchanges that are allowing you to do that, but that's really compromising on security, don't you think?
Yeah, it's taking the risk, right? It's a risk transfer thing. So you mentioned credit cards. So credit cards provide this quick authorization and then slow settlement. They are taking the risk, and that's supported by insurance for that fast authorization. And their insurance obviously is a cost of doing business, and that gets transferred back to the business or the merchants that are using that particular scheme. It's all kind of cost baked into the system. With Web3, with blockchains, and with DLT, promises that those middlemen, those additional costs are removed. But with blockchains and the trilemma compromise, it can't be, right? So it's always transferred somewhere. So that risk is transferred either to a layer 2 for speed purposes, or it's transferred to a DEX or a centralized exchange, which has additional risk associated with it. Clearly, it moves away from the blockchain, and that's a compromise against the principles of decentralization. There are compromises everywhere. It's just which one compromises equate to risk, and it's just based on one's own risk appetite. It's when you don't understand the risk that bad things happen. And I suspect, with the likes of these other networks that purport to have high throughput, the risk is either not understood, or it's hidden under layers of utility or layers of third parties that have built on it. And it's a house of cards, right? If the risk isn't understood and it materializes, then that house of cards falls. So I'm not naming any particular network, but we are seeing cracks in that house appearing through the application of high load, and it's unless one does one's own due diligence on the technology, and there are very few people I think who can adequately do that. The retail and the retail users or the builders in particular ecosystems fail to understand fully the risks associated with those technology choices. In enterprise, you take a long time to do vendor selection or technology selection. You really consider the risks associated with the adoption of that technology from many different angles before you adopt a new technology. And this is a new technology in a new ecosystem with lots of unknowns. And that's why we come back to saying enterprise adoption takes a long time. It's not technology. It's not just writing code that reads an API and does some cool things. It's actually understanding the risks associated with those layers of technology beneath it, and ignore those at your peril if you choose the wrong layer 1 network or layer 2.
Very well covered, Rob. I do want to say that these questions have gotten even better. So hats off to the guys that asked the questions.
They've stepped up their game. They're pushing me to the limit. They really have.
I really like these questions this week, but we need more of them. So make sure you drop your questions for Rob down there in the comments. That's pretty much all we have, Rob. We'll see you next week.
See you next week, Brandon. Take care.
So, Zep, now let's get into one of the things that Rob touched on, and that's decentralized physical infrastructure. I know in the thumb I just have decentralized infrastructure, but we're talking about decentralized physical infrastructure. So Neuron is one of our leaders in Hedera, and the one that's flying under the radar, or has flown under the radar, but I don't think they're going to get away with it much longer, is Wisekey. Danny Eid came back. Thank you so much, Danny Eid, for coming back. Our native detective within the Hedera space, for coming back and giving us some information on Wisekey. Now, he had one clip that he had in the very beginning of his thread, and as Rob mentioned, it was a monster thread, but he had one clip. It was kind of hard to listen to, so I went and I cleaned it up a little bit, and it pretty much explains what Wisekey is doing to this point, but I think they're just getting started, so let's listen in.
Thank you very much. A pleasure. And thank you, Hedera, for the opportunity. So, yes, I am the founder of Wisekey, a Swiss listed company on the NASDAQ, cybersecurity, very focused on encryption. And I am also the founder of CLSQ, which is a semiconductor company also listed on the NASDAQ. So, two Swiss companies all the way up to the NASDAQ, $400 million raise, companies that are growing very fast. So we're doing a lot of stuff. We've been all over Davos, but here what we're doing is two very interesting projects. One is we launched the CL coin yesterday at our event. So this is done with Hedera. So what is CL coin? It's inter-machine payment token. So Wisekey has 19 satellites on orbit. So those are Pico satellites. Those satellites are operationally now. We launched them with SpaceX. Those satellites are low orbit, therefore they detect the sensor technology that we're putting everywhere in connected cars, EV devices. We are putting that into containers. We just signed a deal this morning with DePin here, the largest container in the world, 70 million containers per year traffic. And the satellite basically do track and trace technology to the sensor. So all the information from the sensor to the satellite is sent real time. DePin can detect where their containers are, if there has been some issue in the container, penetration, and so on. But before you pay that with fiat, so you have to do very cumbersome technology in order to get paid, or even to pay the interactions. Now we're doing with tokens. So with conversion with Hedera, we're in a pre-sale process now. We just started yesterday, but basically we are launching a token, which is both a security and payment and utility token that will allow companies to pay with those tokens the use of their machines. So imagine a car that has to pay a parking, imagine a EV plug into electrical device into your car where you have to pay energy. The market of transitions between objects is endless. We are connecting to the internet 7 trillion objects. Each of them has an identity. Wisekey, which is the cryptographic company, provides the identity. Each identity is stored in a secure element, which is also manufactured by us. That secure element is installed into the tracking device. The tracking device is collected from the satellite. Before launching one satellite like that is $250,000. Obviously expensive, and I depend on SpaceX and Elon Musk, and I don't trust him so much to depend on him. So we also invested in launchers. We actually invested in European launchers, so we have our own capability now to launch our own rockets from Europe, actually from Spain. So this is one industrial project on how you can tokenize what we call TIoT, transactional Internet of Things. Huge potential, huge possibilities. And we are very happy to work with Hedera on that. The second project is a project that we launched with the name Wise.art. So Wise.art is online. It is a project that allows you to tokenize art. We started with art because the microchips of Wisekey has been embedded into many big paintings like Picasso's, museums, Vatican. Yesterday we announced in my roundtable in our event with GMA, which is an Italian art collector with $500 million of art from the Renaissance. We are actually integrating that into the Wise.art platform. And we are tokenizing that volume of asset. The Wise.art has something like $150 million worth of art already, growing exponentially. And we have something like 10,000 artists. And why artists are using this is because the Wise.art allows you to do two things. One is that it's like an OpenSea, but with a very high level of authentication. I mean, we are a cybersecurity company. Therefore, all the security that you need in order to make sure that the digital asset corresponds to a physical asset is guaranteed by us. But once you are inside the platform, you can tokenize, obviously, the art and museums and art galleries. Governments are storing a lot of art in boxes, and they want this art now to be available on the metaverse. So those are the two projects. I don't want to take more time, only 20 seconds. Just to say that Hedera is an excellent partner for Wisekey. We are a listed company, so we are in the NASDAQ already. We raise a lot of money. We know the complexity of creating volume on shares and mixing the traditional investment in listed company with tokenization is the way to go. And we are a great example. And we like to work with anybody that would like to expand this model. Thank you very much.
Well, first of all, a massive shout out to Danny, of course, our in-house detective in the Hedera community for giving us that killer thread. I wonder how much we've missed in the last like month or so from Danny not being here. It's probably like some serious market moving news that we've missed. But the point being, what I really love to see about this is, again, you mentioned on the DePin side of things, but also seeing, not just breadcrumbs now with SpaceX, but, the full kind of loaf. To know that they've been working on these, low Earth orbit satellites with them directly, knowing that Wisekey are directly on Hedera, knowing that Sealcoin is directly on Hedera, these relationships are only getting closer together, and I'm very hopeful for a future in which we hear direct conversation between the two organizations. It seems the sort of natural trajectory, right? But I believe the BD team or the BD member driving Wisekey is a man called Andrew Forson. He's the head of growth at the HBAR Association, and I actually met him at Paris Blockchain Week Summit, and I've got to say he's got some serious use cases behind him, serious vision, and I have no doubt that collectively through him, the HBAR Association, Rob, that the Wisekey team is really going to take off on Hedera. So definitely one to really look out for sure.
So, like I mentioned, Wisekey has been flying completely under the radar to this point. That's not going to happen for much longer because I think they have some really exciting stuff that's going to be coming out. But there's another team in the gaming space that has been flying under the radar that I'm really excited about. Kind of a newcomer for us, but they've come through the HashGraph Association. Can you tell us a little bit about Circle of Games?
Yeah, so Circle of Games are one of the biggest sort of Web3 gaming platforms in India, both in terms of an active user perspective, but also in terms of the strategic partnerships they have. So they're partnered with Chingari, which is the largest Web3 social platform in India. It might actually be the largest by active users in the world. They have also got strategic investment from Nazara, who are the only listed gaming platform or gaming company in the whole of India, and they have a serious team behind them. The team behind them includes, the ex-Zynga, who set up Farmville 1 and 2, Mafia Wars, some of the largest sort of Web 2 casual games that have really ever existed. I know when I was younger, everybody was playing those games. It was like a mania almost. So they have both a team that understands how gamification works in Web 2 and how Web 3 can really turbocharge that. But they also have the strategic partnerships and investments to really enable them to execute that vision. What I find really exciting about them is that they've got a great sort of strategy for acquiring additional liquidity outside of Hedera. We saw with Karate Combat, they split their token on Ethereum and on Hedera, and we've really seen the benefits of that. And Circle of Games are doing a similar thing with their token, COG, but this time on Solana and Hedera. And so this is the first time we'll have seen that. We've seen at the early stages of this bull run or this excited market, just how much liquidity there is in Solana. And if we can tap into a percentile of that for an exciting game like this, I think that'll be great news for the liquidity, both on our side of the token, but also on that side of the token on Solana. But alongside, the token being split there, the actual game itself is entirely on Hedera, right? They understood the value proposition of Hedera, the security, the speed, the fees, everything that we already know, and did a similar thing to Karate Combat. Up Only Gaming was only on Hedera, token split across Ethereum on Hedera. Circle of Games, the game is entirely on Hedera, the token split across Solana and Hedera. As you can see, a serious team with a serious vision, and I have no doubt they're going to turbocharge GameFi on Hedera. So one to definitely keep our eyes out on.
Well, putting all the utility, like with Karate Combat, like with Circle of Games, all on Hedera, that's telling us something. Now, they are trying to get liquidity from elsewhere. That certainly makes sense. I'm looking forward to the day when the liquidity can be found natively here within Hedera. So Zeb, we're going to stick with consumer engagement, but instead of with gaming, which is all about consumer engagement, we're going to get into retail brands and things like that. So MIOO is working with some really big brands. We saw from Alex Russman from the HBAR Foundation. He came out and said that there's 25,000 people that are signed up for their demo. So this is going to be exciting to see how MIOO progresses. I think next week we're going to try to get them on for an interview, and maybe the week after that we might have a space on it. But do you have anything to add around MIOO?
Yeah, I think what I find really interesting about them is, again, they're showing narratives in action, right? You know, when the metaverse was first a buzzword, there was this idea of digital twins, you know, having both the physical iteration of an item and the digital iteration of the item, and blending them together to give sort of digital authenticity or guarantee of origin or whatever it might be. And again, we see these narratives come and go, but Hedera actually developed them out. It's not just marketing. This is these narratives in action. And so with MIOO, powered by MIOO rather, Baxter working at sort of the intersection of traditional Italian artisanship and Hedera, right? So there's these amazingly crafted sort of furniture, objects, sofas, all of these different things. And each one has a specific QR code. And when you scan it, you can see exactly where it comes from. You can prove exactly its authenticity. And so that it keeps its value, you know, when you want to pass it on, or if you just want to prove its authenticity to, you know, to whoever's looking at it. Alongside that, each item will have its own sort of rewards, you know, to really, you know, develop that consumer engagement side of thing, which gives the holder of the item in real life also tangible benefits in the digital world and you know, for future purchases, this kind of thing. Each item is represented on Hedera as an NFT, and each download of the iOS app or the Android app is a new account on Hedera. So to know that there's 25,000 people lining up for that, that's a lot of people that will then go on and talk about to their friends and family and so on, and potentially a lot of accounts generation down the line. But either way, it's great to see this vision come to reality and once more on Hedera.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to learning more about that. Now, we are going to take a hard left turn here. We're going to get into open source because Hedera had a couple pieces of news around their open source strategy. The first one is joining the Open Source Security Foundation. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Hedera has joined as the only layer one blockchain, as the only public blockchain actually. They've joined the Open Source Security Foundation, which is I think it's actually hosted by Linux, where Lehman spoke earlier this week. It includes other industry giants, including Apple, Amazon Web Services, Citibank, IBM, Intel, Google, Boeing, and so on. So this is a collective of industry giants across different industries, all pursuing this sort of open source vision. And to see Hedera shoulder to shoulder with them, gives us massive credibility to be featured with them, to be part of those conversations, to, you know, network with them, but also gives us a lot of credibility on our open source front, which we know historically has been a pain point, given that Hedera was originally patented. So I think it's really exciting to see this initiative because I think it's bearing the fruit of the work of Andrew Aitken, who's the head of open source at Hedera. And I really want to see these other organizations, you know, talking to Hedera, learning about Web3, learning about the hashgraph, and also, you know, in familiar languages they understand, right? We know again and again, Hedera is built to enable, you know, the biggest pool of developers being, you know, Java, JavaScript, Go, Python, this kind of thing. And so to have them open source on this council where it's so much more accessible than some other languages, some other teams, I think it's really exciting to see that sort of cross-pollination. So we'll see where it goes. I don't know the ins and outs, but just having them alongside each other, I think is great news for us all.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So another thing that happened this week, well, there was a couple things that we can kind of dovetail together here. Number one, we had a space around the potential for a community DAO for Hedera. And there was also another initiative that happened this week, and that was around HBAR Vote. Essentially, the team behind the Mouth has allowed us to vote weighted based off of how much HBAR we have. And the first question went to Charles. He is, of course, the president of the Hedera Governing Council. And he asked the question, if we were going to have a party, where would you want to have it? We ended up with going to Brazil, of all places. There was a whale that came in and did that. But I think this has potential for, you know, a potential community DAO, allowing the key resource, the key token within our ecosystem, HBAR, people to be able to vote weighted on how much HBAR they have. Now, of course, additional controls can be put in place. We can put, you know, a million HBAR cap to force whales, if they want to participate, to split it up into a bunch of wallets, which most whales probably won't do. Of course, we could limit the official entities. If there's executives with those entities or something along those lines, maybe they wouldn't be able to participate, to make sure that it really stays a community initiative. But as a proof of concept, it was really cool. And I saw that Christian was excited excited about the potential of going to Brazil. I will say that I don't think right now is the time for a party, but Charles wasn't saying when we were going to do it. Maybe when we reach some of our other goals of being a top 10 network, that's when we would actually do a party like this. But it was good to get that first question out there. And I think I might actually be putting out the second question. So looking forward to everything that comes out around that. The next thing, we're going to get into some Swirlds Labs stuff. Of course, Swirlds is the only permanent Hedera governing council member. And there's some news around Swirlds Labs, which is a subsidiary of Swirlds. We had an announcement that Eric Passini has become the CEO of Swirlds Labs. Now, Mance is still the CEO of Swirlds, I believe, but congratulations to Eric on this new promotion. Next up, we have the continuation of the fireside chats. And the one that happened this week, of course, it's with Mance and Lehman, the founders of Hedera. The one that came out this week was talking about the quantum computing resistance around Hedera. Now, the full episode should be coming out today, but they gave us a little bit of a teaser, so I wanted to show that one off.
Is Hedera secure against quantum computers? All right, so we're in really good shape. So here's where we are in Hedera. We use 4 cryptographic primitives. We use hashes in the hash map. Okay, so we have the hash graph that has hashes in it, and we have the history of everything that's ever happened that's tied together with hashes, sort of like a blockchain. So we have hashes all through the system. And we use SHA-384, not 256. Why do we use the extra bits? It's so that we're CNSA compliant, which is, the government requires that for top secret information. And why does it require it? Because it is, we believe, secure against giant quantum computers. So the belief is, even if you took, all the atoms on Earth and turned them into giant quantum computers, you would not be able to break SHA-384. SHA-384 is thought to be secure against quantum computers forever. That's pretty good news. And we use SHA-384. Most blockchains use SHA-256. Theoretically, quantum computers could break it, so they'll someday have to go to 384. Although, to be honest, I think 256 is secure enough.
All right, Zep, and with that, we'll go ahead and get into some network analysis. So we did see over the past couple days the transactions per second on the Hedera network drop off. Now, I'm sure that's because MIOO is doing some resetting, and I'm sure it's going to be coming back. But we still have averaged about 1.6 thousand transactions per second over the last week, with a max TPS getting close to 5,000. We almost had 1 billion transactions just in the past 7 days. Time to consensus is sticking around 3.4 seconds, and we've created over 100,000 accounts over the past week. Moving down to our fungible tokens, Wrapped HBAR takes the top spot, followed by Karate, USDC, Dovu, and Sauce. Then we have War, Unlucky, Zero, the bridged version of USDC, and Energy Trade Token. Looking at our NFTs, the Saucer Swap Liquidity Token took the tops, followed by the newcomer you mentioned, Peculiar Peeps, the 2024 Road Code Access Card, Summoning Stone, which I assume is associated with a game. And along with those, we have Zero, the Doctor Who Worlds Apart NFT, the Earthlings Bag Holder NFT, as well as the Hashpack INO NFT. All right, Zep, and with that, we'll go ahead and jump into some DeFi. Taking a look at DeFi Llama, the TVL in the Hedera DeFi ecosystem is at just over $90 million. 84 million of that is on Saucer Swap and 4 million on HSuite. Moving over to the HBAR and crypto markets, Bitcoin is down about 6% on the week, but up 1.7% on the day. HBAR has stabilized after the washout last week and is up 2.5% on the day and slightly on the week to about 8.3 cents. 7.6 cents is setting up as a decent area of support, but my big question, if we can head north, is what we do with 10 cents. Time will tell. All right, Zep, that's pretty much all we have. Is there anything else you'd like to pass on?
Yeah, I think what I found really exciting at the moment is that we're hitting on both cylinders, right? Enterprise has always been our strong point, and having more and more people at Paris Blockchain Week Summit realize that and understand that and see just the maturity of our ecosystem in that sense, and really recognizing Hedera as a leader in enterprise blockchain, enterprise DLT was very, very refreshing. But then you combine that with the endeavors of our retail ecosystem. You see Circle of Games getting another $1 million raise with the listed gaming company in India, the only listed gaming company in India. You see Karate Combat continuing to excel, continuing to get mindshare, continuing to take over Web3. I think we're very well positioned on both sides. Of course, we want as much energy in that retail side as possible, but I really think we're starting to see that in the same way that we started seeing, Foundation, HBAR Foundation use cases come live, with Karate Combat and the likes. I think we're going to start seeing that with the Hashgraph Association and we're going to really start seeing the fruits of their works over the coming months and years. So there's a lot to be excited about, all that's to say, and yeah, looking forward to next week for sure.
Zeb, what I'm most excited about right now from this past week is decentralized physical infrastructure. The stuff that came out around Wisekey is mind-blowing, and we're going to get some more information around that from Rob. I think what Neuron is doing is going to be really impressive. We have, last year we were upset that Helium didn't move over to Hedera. They moved to Solana. But I actually think Neuron is doing a lot of the similar things that Helium is doing, but it's going to be even more broad. And the fact that they're building on a more stable network with Hedera, I think is going to give them an even larger advantage. Looking forward to next week, I'm going to try to get Fligs Mobile on because they have some exciting announcements that are coming up in that telecom industry. Also, we're going to try to get MIOO on to try to get some more information around that. I'm looking forward to what Rob has to say around Wisekey next week as well. The questions we got from the community this week for Rob were fantastic. So keep those coming in, drop those down in the comments, and we'll try to get some answers for you. That's pretty much all we have. We'll see you next week.